Hello everyone, welcome to Saves vs Death, a TTRPG actual play channel. Tonight I will be hosting a new episode of Night City Sofa to talk about R. Talsorian Games' latest Cyberpunk Red DLC, Chasing the Rabbit, Roller Derby in the Time of the Red. You can of course find all of R. Talsorian's DLCs on their website, Tattoo Your Games, or Read for Fun. If you have any questions or comments, don't hesitate to post them as we go through this wonderful DLC. The link for the DLC is, of course, on the screen or in the video description if you're watching this on YouTube. It's rtalsoriangames.com/downloadable-content. If you type /downloads, it will, however, still bring you to that page, which is super handy. Before we get into the DLC, which is so fantastic, we're gonna go around, do some introductions of people. I'll start, so we'll give you our names, our pronouns, and where you can find us. I'm Jessica, or Jess, she, her. You can find me mostly here on Saves vs Death, but if you look at Jessica on Instagram, Blue Sky, I'm like, where am I? YouTube and Patreon, you can find me there as well, doing other sorts of content. But mostly I'm here playing Moxie 11 media in our Saturday games or running Indie Bandits on Sundays. And I am going to pass it off to Emeron.
Hello, I am Emeron. I am a Cyberpunk Red GM. I also stream here on Twitch. I run a series called Neon Inferno, and I have a lot of GM, and I'm starting to branch out into player instructional content over on my YouTube channel. You could find me at Twitter at TSH_Emeron, on Blue Sky at Emeron, and then I've got a Discord, the YouTube channel, the Twitch. There's a command for those of you here live, and I'm sure Jess will have me linked down below for those of you who are watching it later on YouTube.
Absolutely.
Hello, I'm Patient Xero. I'm mostly here on Saves vs Death, sort of taking on roles in various one-shots. I was recently in the Calendar That Hung Itself, the Majesty of the Ascension one-shot run by Games, for blanking on the reason that we did that again. Leap year day, that's what that was. You know, the whole premise of the, one-shot in and of itself. Before that was Fiasco with Knights of Our Lives, and I believe before that was Lance for Welcome to My Nightmare?
Possibly.
I seem to do a lot of horror-themed stuff, apparently, on the channel.
Well, Knights of Our Lives was supposed to be lighthearted, because that was Valentine's Day. It just, it had a supernatural element.
Yeah, kind of leaning into the supernatural element. I don't really have socials. I'm just sort of here doing things. Yeah.
Thanks for being here, guys.
Can't really get much more than that.
Yeah, no, glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah,
thank you.
So happy to have you on the channel. We're going to talk about this DLC, and I haven't been this excited to talk about a DLC probably since August, when the Corporate Con Apps and Studio Apartments DLC released.
That was a good one.
It was
to be fair.
really
I
good.
could understand the excitement around that one.
Oh, I loved how they all had their own, flavor and everything. And I know there's been a lot of handy DLCs since then. But this one just felt like one of those where I was, so excited to read into it and discover all the bits and pieces that they added. And I'm just, I love this DLC. It's so good. Pick it up. If you haven't, go download now. While listening, of course. It is one of their longer DLCs, total 10 pages. Of course, the first page is your cover art, which you can see on the screen. It's absolutely gorgeous. The last page, they give you a track. And then the rest of it is just, there's so much lore and content and rules on how everything fits together. Starting with a story from Demolition Derby of the Watson Whammers. Her real name is Deborah. And she talks about, she's talking to her Ripper Doc, applying subdermal armor, as she gets, subdermal armor implants, for, doing, roller derby. And how she gained the money for it was she was approached by a corp, or a suit for an executive, because the executive's kid had run off and joined a roller derby league, and he ran away from home, and they were like, we want you to hurt him and make him regret this decision and send him back. Like, don't kill him, don't do anything, just scare him, make him realize this isn't for him, and get him back home. Which she did. Got the Eddies, but like the end of the story is like, but you can tell he's got the look. This isn't going to be the last time that they, you know, play roller derby. And it shows kind of like how the game works, as she describes, like, you know, how she like beat up on this kid in the game, or on the track. It shows like how brutal the sport can be. But what I love the most is it showcases for players and GMs how even if your group doesn't want to play roller derby, you can base a job around this content.
Yeah, well, and the interesting thing to add on to that we kind of were told in this really subtle, sneaky, like, Artal came in and was like, hey, by the way, we want to reveal something to all of you. The latest DLC is part of, or was written originally for Tales of the Red Forlorn Hope, which signals that it most likely is part of a gig for the new book that's going to be coming out sometime this year, if their estimated timelines are right. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing kind of how they interpret this into a mission in a longer thing like a Tales of the Red, because I know a lot of Street stories were like, they took us like 2 to 3 sessions really to like get through and really like get everything done. So this is going to be very interesting. I'm really interested to see how they integrate this.
That's awesome. I should say, by the way, this is written and designed by Linda Evans, who did just a phenomenal job putting this together.
Yeah, this DLC looks really amazing. I've had just ideas flowing in my brain since I picked it up and read through. It's like, oh, there's so much in here and just like such a small package.
Yeah, it's another good minigame DLC. I feel like the more of these we get, the better the footing is for like having some cool stuff to do for maybe downtime gigs, or doing like side stuff that is more than just like, I'm gonna go do a mercenary job. That's more edge runner. So you've got stuff that touches more on like what daily life is like. And I feel like that's something that the more expanded that view gets of Night City, the more human a lot of the people in it begin to feel, and some of these characters kind of come out of the woodworks as part of that.
100%. I know I recently, like, this came out, and so I used it. I've used it in my game, Indie Bandits on Sundays, already, because the Fixer and the Tech are starting their own, like, repair shop thing, sort of, and they were going to do a skateboard shop because I created this 90s themed mall, like day market mall.
Oh, that's fun.
That has like a skate park kind of built in it, so they're like, oh, we'll sell boards and stuff and it'll be great. And then roller derby came out and I was like, yeah, the first skate park you go to has a couple roller derby skaters, so every kind of place they went, I threw in a couple like derby people, which was really, really fun.
Oh, that's really cool. No, I'll be interested to see how that plays out, because that's always fun.
But yeah, let's talk about like the history of roller derby that's in the DLC. Patient, I'm gonna throw that to you.
Okie dokie. So I was really surprised at like how kind of in depth they went with the roller derby history, covering like way back its origins all the way back to like the 1930s, and sort of like where the spirit of roller derby came from, in just like endurance sports and physical things like that people used to do during hard times, which is sort of a nice kind of duality with how things are in the time of the Red, almost like 100 years later. It's, you know, tough times, money short, people have to make their own entertainment where they can get it. What else was there? I liked the addition, because it was something I was thinking about when I was reading through some here, because it wasn't really explicit. I liked the addition in the history about how it's roller derby is no longer an all-female sport. That it started out in the origins of being like, you know, a female-only sport, but now in the time of the Red and as things moved on, you know, anybody can be part of a roller derby team as long as they're able to play. I thought that was a really, really nice addition. It kind of opens up the opportunity for anybody to just sort of get in there, and you're not sort of pigeonholed because you pick one one gender, one sex for your character over the other. I've actually been a bit of a roller derby fan for a little while. I've been to a few matches and I've seen how things go. And when Jess first explained how like roller derby worked within the new DLC, and when I started reading over the history, I really liked the addition of the rabbit. I could already sort of imagine in my mind how it would speed up the game, how it made things a lot more interesting. Because really, you go to roller derby to see people get beat up. It's a physical sport. It's short and long of it. You go there to see people get beat up. You see people throw elbows and punches and whatnot. And sometimes you just start taking bets on how many people are gonna get thrown out of the game before this penalty stop. But the addition of the rabbit I thought was really, really good, and gives people like a lot more of a clear objective within the game to understand it. I think it also brings the understanding of how roller derby works to a much easier level, because I knew I had to watch, oh god, I forget how many matches or how many bouts before I was able to wrap my brain around how the scoring worked and how penalties and things like that. In this DLC, I think it just outlines things very, very nicely. How they brought the rabbit in there as a focus for, the inherent violence that's within roller derby in and of itself, to kind of bring it in and draw the audience was a really good.
I think my favorite line in the DLC on the history is, she realized that violence was why people came. So it's like, well, instead of it being part of the sport, that's going to be the point of the sport. Let's go make this whole new role because of the violence. And I was like, that's legit.
It's another, it's interesting that in one way or another, both of the kind of sport mini games we've received so far, unless you consider ELO TCG a sport, I do. Not many others, I think, agree. But most of the sports we've gotten, if you count ELO TCG, are combat sports. I think that also has there's a certain subtext to that being Night City is, even in the time of the Red, when it's rebuilding, it's still very, I would argue, maybe in some ways more violent than by the time we hit 2077 and get that really on-screen kind of look at what the city's like. It's really fascinating to see kind of the combat sport aspect of all this.
For sure. Sorry, Patient, I totally derailed everything.
No, that's about the short and long of it, really. And there's a little bit in here about how the Fourth Corporal War totally just fucked everything up and, burned all the derby dreams down to the ground after the rabbit was introduced. But it gives a little bit of hope afterwards, how in the time of the Reds, an enterprising entrepreneur by the name of Bastion Norton, on the mostly nostalgia and a picture of his mom that he found as a roller derby girl, put a lot of his efforts and money and conniving into forming the new roller derby league and bringing some new life back into the sport.
I think that's such a street level thing to do too. Is oh, I found a picture of my mom as this awesome roller derby person. Why doesn't this exist? Let's make it exist. I think that's so fun. And I'm just gonna touch on quickly too that it adds, even in the history, there's lore additions. So Bastion Norton owns Norton and Nice Sweet Kibble food truck. And I'm like, oh, food truck. I keep forgetting sometimes when I'm on the street as GM that there's these things that exist. I'm like, food trucks exist. There's a brand of food truck for this Sweet Kibble for Continental brand. I'm like, yes, this is going to exist somewhere. I don't know where I'm going to put it, but I'm going to do it.
Just roving around Night City. That's where it goes.
Yeah, it just...
Yeah. Anywhere it's convenient, honestly. Yeah, no, I always have a noodle food truck that shows up in mine. It's Good Noods, Noods. So it's
yes.
It's one of those lovely punny little ramen trucks that pops up every so often when the players are like, "What food's here at the night market?" Well, Good Noods set up. So
that is amazing.
Yeah, but I think it is cool though. I think that's kind of the neat thing is I feel there's very rarely DLC we get that doesn't inject some like NPC faction group or like location
Yeah.
that we then get to see more of. Sometimes in things like Tales of the Red, other times we get like multiple DLCs where like talking about ELO, which is like one of my favorite DLC series that has existed for the game so far. Derek Sylar is like a constant recurring character there, and they even bring up in one of the DLC several others. So it's always fun when we get these kind of like diegetic like injections of lore into the city, just as part of the overall history or narrative that's presented in the block of text that we get.
Oh yeah. I'm terrified that my internet is lagging horribly. If it is, I apologize.
It doesn't look bad on my end, so I think you're good.
Yay!
That looks good.
Yeah.
It just took like forever for it to send a message in Twitch, so I was like, ooh. Fingers open.
Yeah, no, I think it on my end it looks fine. I don't see like the video quality look bad or anything, so I think we're good there.
Awesome. All right. So let's talk about the leagues in Night City.
Yes, let's.
Yeah.
That was what what's the name of that?
The Wonderland League.
Night City
It's
Wonderland.
on page 4. Yep.
Got so many tabs open over here.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Thus is the struggle.
There we go. So yeah, the new roller derby league that showed up in Night City that started with was the Watson Whammers and the North Central Night City Alices. Some big long name. Night City Alices. That's
South Night City. I think was the place they're from. But yeah.
Yeah. It's started by them thanks to Mr. Bastion Norton. And it's comprised of 12 distinct squads, each one of them from around different areas of Night City. They're mostly like high-level amateurs, so I'm trying to think of. I wish I had better sports knowledge. I can't think of it. I can't think of a real-world sports analog for what that would be. Whatever's below the major leagues in, I don't know, baseball.
Yeah,
so that would be their level.
Yeah, there's like a semi-pro
leagues?
league, I think. Like, yeah, it is the minor leagues. Yeah, that's typically what they're called. But I know just enough of that to be dangerous because my mom's a giant sports fan, and it did not rub off on me that well. so like for me, it's like every time we get these sports DLCs, I'm like, this is cool, but I'm gonna need to struggle like comprehend this because I do not sport. Like.
So yeah, there is no. So yeah, the Night City Wonderland League. It's not professional. It's not like you're not going to be selling out stadiums or seeing it on garden patches or on vid screens or anything like that. They mostly make their money from like ticket sales and things like ticket sales, merch sales, gambling. But that typically isn't quite enough for people to make their ends meet. Or at least support the teams in and of themselves. I don't want to step on anybody's toes in case they wanted to talk about it later, but like the Watson Whammers, they have additional programs of like the Dr. Whammer program, so that they can make extra funds. I know that some of the squads do a lot of extra things for gambling. They take bigger gambling cuts, and. I kind of got off script here a little bit.
What script? It's Night City stuff. We have a script that we never read.
It's a guideline, really.
Yep.
Yeah, that's sort of the league in a nutshell. The DLC gives you a breakdown of each of the 12 different leagues. They're sorry, not the leagues, squads. I'm getting my lingo all messed up here. Each of the different squads with a little bit of a brief overview, their team colors, their team logos, what they're about, where you can find them, and I don't really want to go too much further than that until without a proper segue, I guess. I think I'm getting ahead of myself.
Sure. Let's. I'm gonna pass it over to. I guess we'll pass it to Emron really quickly to talk about like a squad or two that you really jived with. I was looking for something I had read, and I don't think it's one of the 12, and now I can't find what I'm looking for, but I'll get there.
Okay. No, totally. So the two that I found really interesting, just because of one was because of their colors, and then reading their profile, it made me laugh a little bit. And then I saw further down, there's another that's like the polar opposite end of like the social strata, and they're just like insanely good at the game. So we first got the Executive Zone Unicorn. So they are like an all corpo squad. Their colors are noted as iridescent rainbow stripes. And just the first thing that makes me think of is like the June, like everyone turns their logo rainbow, and so I'm like, I don't know if that's where that started for them, but the fact that it's an all corpo team and that's their colors, I'm just like, this is it already. It's lining up to tell a kind of narrative, and I kind of am like here for it. So the logo's a unicorn head, and the book describes them as being a team that's like, they've got everything. They've got practice facilities, they've got the gear, they've got sponsors. You know, they're the kids or relatives of corpo executives, right? They're trust fund kids by and large that make up the team, it sounds like. With that comes the sense of, I guess you could say, entitlement, or at the very least the lack of a drive to like really work hard because everything else has kind of been given to you, because they are described as being incredibly lazy, and they always settle somewhere firmly middle of the pack when they have all of the stuff that could send them to the high end of the league if they just used it. So I thought that was funny because, like, yeah, of course, you've got probably the most affluent team in the league right there, and they're lazy because they've had everything else given to them. Why not a championship? Now, by contrast, because in this time, obviously, Pacifica isn't a combat zone hellhole yet. So it is an up-and-coming amusement park, and the people who work there formed a league despite working 12-hour shifts during the week. And they, by contrast to the Silver Spoon Trust Fund people, they have teal and sandy yellow as their colors, and their logo is a pointed spiral seashell. They take this so seriously that their practice sessions are described as like a boot camp. They are very, very serious about the league itself. They mention in there that they usually top in the top 3 places, so they're almost always podium contenders, and that as of the time of 2045, when this is canonically been placed in the universe, they are the current reigning champions of the league. So, you know, I just thought it was funny. You have two teams here, one that has everything and no motivation, and the other team that by all rights should have near nothing, and somehow they're the champions. So it's like really shows some of that like class turmoil within the city. Another little quick thing I'll throw on about the Executive Zone Unicorns. Right now, they're also at a point where they aren't looked so favorably upon as favorably because Lazarus, who runs the security for the Executive Zone in the city, stopped one of the guest teams that had a bout with them scheduled, and actually shot and killed 2 of their players for this other team that was coming to visit them. And so like half the teams in the league that season just like canceled their bouts with them. So they literally could not play because they didn't want to risk losing players to like a trigger happy corpo guard. So again, it's like you've still got that class turmoil within the city that really makes a big part of Cyberpunk what it is. So I thought that those teams were really cool to kind of compare for that reason.
But did the corp like team really care?
That's the question, right? Because like it didn't seem like it was at their command that it happened based on how it's kind of put. It seems more like there was a genuine misunderstanding of like, hey, gutter trash, get the hell out of the exec zone. This is for people who are better than you. And like, no, we're here to play a bout. And then when they wouldn't leave, they just shot the team.
Yep.
So they probably wouldn't care. Yeah, but it's like, it sounds like it wasn't, unlike some corpo things, it wasn't like, it wasn't malicious. It sounds like genuinely there was like a mix-up of some kind.
Yeah.
But it's caused them to not be looked upon favorably at all. So
but
there could be some interesting plot hooks there.
Since they had to cancel so many, they didn't actually leave
Yeah.
their safe zone. Like, they would have rather canceled than be like, no, we're gonna go somewhere else. Like, it just either factors into that privilege or that laziness, probably both.
Probably both. And yeah, and I agree with that completely. Yeah, it's a very much, I think, a and situation there.
Yeah. Speaking of that team, that was the Industrial Zone Skids, who I'm going to talk about, which are from the industrial part of Haywood, and are a bike courier group that come out of the DV Rambling Rose. DV, we looked up, thank you to everyone looking it up, stands for Dead Vessel, which is just, I don't know, a fun fact. But you can check that out, because it's first introduced in the Tales of the Red Street Stories gig called Haven't Got a Stitch to Wear. That's where that all comes from. So I love that they fleshed out a little bit more of that, and they were like, we need a team. You know what? It's this bicycle courier group that, you know, now also plays roller derby. And I think it's cool because you can have them, you find them doing like tricks on their bicycles, which I totally didn't mean to be bandits, or on their roller derby skates. And which way can you interact with them? Their colors are black and gray. They have tire treads as their logo. And I found it interesting depending on like how you use them, because in the October DLC, not the October DLC, I'm lying. In the Danger Gal Dossier Plus DLC, there we go. They did all those plot hooks, and one of them was Tiger Eats, where you can sign up as a Tiger Claw, like to do deliveries for food trucks for Tiger Claw for extra cash. And I'm curious how those would cross over, because as a bike courier service, could you hire them? Would you end up couriering in their territory at some point? Do you like develop a rivalry? Like, just taking those two hooks, you could tie things in together and just, you know, do some juicy things with that.
You could. Well, and as someone who's actually like played through the gig, that the Fixies, who are the courier group that make up the Skids, their range of operation is kind of all over Night City, as described in the gig itself. So like the fact that they've got like potential competition is, that is an interesting thing. If you like know the gig and know the gang already, or like they're not really a gang, they're more of like it's like kind of a cooperative, but they're a very interesting group. I find myself like I really like the Fixies. I think they're a really interesting group overall. So I'm glad to see them make the DLC in that way.
That's awesome. But yeah, there's some really cool things you do. Also, just as a side plug, in the newsletters that I write, I actually picked the Seashells and the Industrial Zone Skids and wrote up a little like article of them having a match. Because Attila the Bun, who is the rabbit that I made up for the Pacific Seashells, has a long-standing like friendly rivalry with the Skids jammer Lynn Diesel, which was my nod to Linda Evans, who wrote the DLC. And they were like great friends off the track, but as a jammer and a rabbit, like they are head-to-head, always trying to beat one another. And that was just really fun to like create and throw in. So check out the newsletter on our Patreon. It's absolutely free. If you want to read a little thing about that. And Patient, you had a couple squads to talk about.
Yeah, I was going to talk about... First, I was going to talk about the combat zone cannons, and I was going to do the dockside billhooks. I picked the two of them for kind of similar reasons that Emeron, I believe, Emeron Entity picked the Executive Zone Unicorns and the Pacifica Seashells, as I kind of liked the dichotomy that the two of them sort of represented. What drew me to the Combat Zone Cannons, actually getting ahead of myself again, their colors are copper and red, and their logo is a bullet emerging from an explosion, which is kind of fitting. They're based out of an abandoned warehouse in the old Combat Zone, and founded by a part-time solo. Where's his name here? Brick Coleman, the current owner and operator of Jesse James's Kosher Deli. I thought was another nice, just sort of little add-on to the existing history and lore of the world here. and he funds the team largely by the efforts from Edge Running, which I thought was really, really neat. And he does this for... Let's get 1 second here. And this is why, sorry, this reason here is why I picked the cans to begin with. They see the roller derby the roller derby team that they're setting up as an opportunity to steer the youth of the old combat zone away from gang membership, while still building up the skills they need to survive the life in Night City's worst combat zone. I thought that was really neat that they're doing this thing as sort of like a way to uplift the youth and give them sort of a better opportunity, or like, a better way to kind of live their life, to like not necessarily fall into the same cycle of just violence and crime and whatever they may have to do to survive in the combat zone, while still not leaving them at a detriment to the element that they're living in. So I thought that was a really sort of nice little like bit of hope, and just
but like a dark hope, so right? Because it's like, play this super violent game, so you have experience with combat and violence, but in a safer environment.
Yeah. So it's just like, I thought that was a nice sort of contrast to the world of Cyberpunk in and of itself. That there's this little thing here that even like one of the worst places, somebody's still trying to do some really good, like do something good for the community and trying to make the world a little bit of a better place.
Yeah, well, and especially when, like, in Danger Gal, we see Generation Red, and, like, there's a few of them who actually have, like, rollerblades or skates, or one of them is a bike. Like, they're kids in that regard, too. So that is an interesting, like, bit of interplay as someone who's used Generation Red as characters in my game. Like, that's always interesting to see that kind of further development of the city, and, like, especially if your players fly off the handlebars a little bit, which I've had experience with, where they like get a little too gun happy and murder hobo-y. You show them like the small, like, look at this community that the person that you just moments ago wanted to kill. They've set this beautiful thing up. Are you really going to be the thing to ruin it? And they have to think about that for a moment, and it slows their roll a little bit, which is, I think, always a kind of a nice tool to have as a GM, have that in my back pocket.
Yeah. And especially to put that in a zone that is naturally, I mean, even by name, so combat heavy. It's like, oh, we're going to combat, so we're definitely going to go and, fight things. And it's like, oh, but you've run into this group. And it's like, oh, It's like, yes, where do your morals lie? Let's talk about this.
Mm-hmm.
By contrast, the billhooks weren't my first pick, but when I started thinking about things a little bit more, I liked them against the combat zone cannons, because there was just like sort of two sides of the same coin in a way. Their colors are black on ocean blue, which I thought was a very neat sort of distinction, is where they're just kind of giving, most of the other ones they're giving a this color and this color, or these colors here. It's like, no, this one's very specifically, these are how the color layering is going to go. So that was a nice small detail. With the logo of a sailor's billhook. It's largely comprised of members from the Upper Marina and the Haywood Industrial District, kind of just looking to blow off some steam, have a good time after doing work. They kind of strike me as like this group of, like, I don't want to say ruffians, but definitely people who are more into the derby for like the violent aspect. I get kind of like the goons from it's a hockey goons sort of vibe from the Bill team. Like, if they win, that's great, but they're really there just to kind of like more, throw some punches and beat up the other team than anything. But what I really liked about them in comparison is that they lay out like some of their hustles. They sell where is it? Right there. Homebrew intoxicants, and take a hefty share of the gambling action, which none of the others really seem to make note of being part of gambling or encouraging gambling at their events. I know it's sort of mentioned bits and pieces throughout the DLC that it's a way that people do it, but I thought it was very neat that they specifically mentioned in the billhooks that they take so much from gambling. And it seems more like your I don't want to say sleazy sort of sort of roller derby team, but it definitely has that less refined, more just. I'm trying to find a way to not be mean with words.
It feels very like the team feels very blue collar in the way that it approaches it, without being like a group of booster gangers like you'd get out of like the old Combat Zone, for example.
Yeah.
Like rough, but not like underbelly of society kind of rough.
Yeah, exactly. They're just a regular working class kind of people now. They're just like, hey, we just want something to do.
Though it is interesting that they mentioned they take a share of the gambling action, because that makes me almost wonder if they somehow, like, there's a gig waiting to be written in my mind about a, like, look, Edgerunner crew, we need this match to be fixed, and we need you to negotiate, because the person we want to lose will not talk with us. And it's like almost like they want that to happen. So that's interesting. It's just interesting that they mentioned that when, like you pointed out, they don't really talk about that much in the other squads individually. So that almost makes me wonder, like, are we talking like match fixing? Are we talking like maybe just people that are like well connected and know their way around the scene, or just part of that, or how does that work? So that's fun.
I kind of do that feeling too. I think if they would not be above match fixing, is it does also mention in their little description here that's not uncommon for star players of an opposing team to come down with a bad case of, quote, shattered kneecaps, end quote, before a bout. So they definitely strike me as these kind of group that are willing to just, they're not afraid to get their hands dirty and, you know, take a bit of the game off of the track. So that could be a really interesting antagonistic kind of group to work with, but not like hard antagonists, you know?
Right, like they're not going to kill you, but they absolutely are going to break limbs. They're not above that. Well, almost makes me wonder, because they talk in the Night City history a little bit about like one of the initial power blocks within the city before the corporations really moved in and like solidified control over the whole city. There were different mafia families that came in, and initially they were the ones who kind of established where the power dynamics were and how they balanced around the city and its various districts. So because some of that almost feels like low-level mafia kind of stuff. So it almost makes you wonder, like, because that's kind of where like maybe these guys aren't connected in quite that same way to the criminal underworld, but they might be the pawns of that criminal underworld to an extent. And that, again, like there's just like a whole set of gigs ready to be written on that. I think that's so interesting.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, you could just drop like just to drop any number of NPCs that you want your players to meet for, it's like at a Bill Hooks game, and just be like, yeah, there's so-and-so over there, so-and-so over there. You need to look for a job, or you need to get to a night markers or something like that. This is the place to be. It seems like it'd be a good opportunity, like a Bill Hooks game, or a Bill Hooks sort of like, I don't know, as a bout, I guess is what the proper terminology is in this here, would be like a great, this would be a good way to sort of like, you know, have people start rubbing shoulders with some of the seedier elements of Night City without actually, you know, getting right into it right away.
Yeah, and again, like some of this also may be dynamics we see come out when we see how this gets integrated into Forlorn Hope when the book comes out. So like I'm kind of interested to see if any of these teams are maybe like if we read deep enough in there and tinfoil hat a little bit, there might be hints as to like some of the conflicts to come. But that is very interesting. Like that there are some of these that are very clearly like, these guys are kind of not great people. And these guys are all good people for the most part, or at the very least, they're good at playing this game. So that's kind of, yeah, it's going to be an interesting thing. I really want to see how they fit this into a wider context of a gig. Because I don't think we've ever really seen a mini game like this factor into that before.
Yeah. I was thinking too, because there's only 12 squads in the league, but people are still trying to like up their game to take a spot. I wonder if the Bill Hooks are on like the shit list, where, you know, even if the gig is like, we have to fix this match, but we can't be caught doing it because we'll definitely get kicked out of the league if that happens, and we don't want that to happen, so you have to go and make sure that these guys can't play.
Oh. Yeah, exactly. That's good stuff right there. I like that. I like that a lot. Oh, that's good stuff. Yeah, I could see it. That's ooh.
Right?
I really want to see how this plays. I really want to see how this plays out. Like, but I'm excited about like all the scheduled releases that we know are kind of coming out like in the near future. So that's not a weird thing.
I couldn't find it. Maybe it's not one of the leagues. It must be mentioned around it. I know there was a team I read somewhere, or a squad, comprised of an Elflines Online group.
Hold up.
So a whole Elfline actually has put together their own squad to play.
Now
But
I'm gonna look.
I don't think it's one of the 12. I think it's mentioned. It's mentioned somewhere. I could not find it, and I'm like,
I remember reading that too.
I love this so much, especially for my bandits who are ELO players, to have them come across this elf line. Who also
now I've got to look because that's like I said, that
found it.
Where is it?
Yeah.
Page 2. It's in the middle of page 2 with the Chasing the Rabbit story.
Right side, left side.
Left side.
Oh yes, there it is. Join the Pinkies, a non-league roller derby squad formed out of an elfline group. They squeeze in practice between online raids.
That's hilarious. Oh, I love that.
So there you go. There's an extra like non-league team, the Pinkies.
That's really fun. Oh man, no, that's really fun.
Right?
I love that they just another little nod to ELO. I'm like,
yes.
Please give. I'm still waiting for ELO expansion pack 2. James Hutt, if you hear this, please give us expansion pack 2. Yep. We need it.
We do.
But no, I won't keep derailing this to talk about ELO, but I will talk about ELO if you don't stop me.
We will have an ELO discussion at one point.
Show.
Considering I built my entire Cyberpunk Red campaign based on the DLC. So
beautiful.
The only other thing I think I want to talk about is I like that the Roosters in theirs, they talk more about the fans than the team. Like the fans actually showing up with like orange painted mohawks because they're the Roosters. And with the Watson Whammers, who, you know, are the founders, they also help newer squads like learn how to play. I love the Adopt a Whammer program, where a Whammer, like if you pay, they will send you like pictures and text messages and stuff like to whoever's adopted them. I think throughout how like it's probably per month. So it doesn't like detail how that is, but I'm like, man, you could totally as an edge runner set something like that up and be like, adopt a runner program.
Yeah, like,
get, especially
that...
when you're starting off and you're a low level and you don't have enough money for a cube, or maybe that's just my experience with playing as a GM, where it's like, good luck getting 500 eddies.
Yeah, like, I think it really boils down to, like, how often your GM gives you gigs and how much free time there is between them. The other interesting thing about the Whammers that I saw that you could leverage into game mechanics depending on like how you want to get creative with it is that because they have deals with so many local businesses, they rarely pay for their own food. So that's like a whole part of your lifestyle that you just literally discount if you have a similar deal or your group finds a way to forge a similar deal. Like if you end up as maybe part of this Wonderland League, if you really wanted a whole campaign centered around this, you could perhaps have the same thing happen to you. So I think that that's a really interesting idea that maybe deserves some exploration.
Also, two things before I forget. One, you could adopt a Whammer, which is really cool because then your GM could just randomly send you, be like, oh, by the way, you got this text today, from this roller derby person.
Here's your daily Whammogram.
Yeah, really. Oh my god, a Whammogram. I love it. The second thing, though, as a media, because I play as a media, your rumors can come from these roller derby leagues now. Like, you could make a contact with one of these members in various areas, and that's a whole section for a GM or a media or a player to pull from and be like, hey, you know, I'm supposed to know a local celebrity. I called them Luna Moon. Fuck, they're gonna be a roller derby person. I don't know for who. There we go. Because I hadn't figured out who they were yet. Now I know.
Time to make an unofficial roller derby team for the Three Moon Clan mentioned in Night City Tarot.
Oh.
Get them some play. That would be where you have a player named Luna.
Hells yes. Let's do it.
Yeah, it's funny. Dime and I were talking last night a little bit about Three Moon Clan, and we're like, wow, we haven't actually seen them come up again since that DLC. So I'm kind of like that would be a good way to kind of wrangle them into a story that you write yourself. But yeah.
So much fun. So many possibilities, and that's what I love so much about this DLC. It's not just roller derby, which you can totally just throw in and do as like a one-shot or you know, a simple fun exercise, but there's so much that you can take from it to add to your world.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, I think that's true of any of these minigame DLCs, is that quite a few of them, again, like I said earlier, they just got little elements that if you read more, deeper than just the text for the DLC, you'll get stuff to pull out and make a campaign about, or write plot hooks about, or you know, what have you. And it's always so interesting to see what we learn about Night City beyond the game itself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, after reading this DLC, I thought it would be really fun to do a low roll, or even a no roll sort of campaign gig story idea, just based around roller derby. Because a lot of what I've read in this, it doesn't seem like you're, aside from maybe solo points and things you would have, most of your role abilities aren't really going to come into play. So you could play a character an extreme street level, not even be an edge runner in something like this, and probably still have a very exciting campaign, you know? You could replace a lot of the high-stakes combat with roller derby bouts. You could have a lot of the kids' social encounters be between your players, your teammates, the other teams, fans, promoters, etc., etc., etc. So you can still have that sort of, you know, gritty, visceral experience of running, you know, kind of running the streets and playing in that, you know, playing on the fringe of the play, you know, those dark edges there, but not have to be full on running, running the edge and putting your life on the line. You can kind of get a more, more of a slice of life sort of, slice of Night City life sort of story out of it.
No.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I just had this idea for multiple GMs, multiple teams, doing Saturday night bouts, every week, and being actually throwing a league together and seeing who comes out on top.
Yeah, no, I know Diamond, because I play in her games every Wednesday, and my character recently got into the ELO TCG, and I'm like, so Diamond, when are we doing my ELO tournament arc? And she says, you joke, but I have underground ELO games for you to play, and that's I'm planning this, and I'm like, okay, very cool. So yeah, any one of these mini games, you end up with that element for just what does the league look like? Do you play with people that maybe are future antagonists? Are they maybe going to be you know, future friends that you meet and stuff? So it's, yeah, it would be an interesting one to get multiple GMs together, all right, this Edge Runner crew versus that Edge Runner crew, go.
Yeah, let's see.
Fantasy roller derby Cyberpunk League.
Yeah.
Yes.
What do you mean I got drafted to the other team? I don't want to be traded.
Okay, I'm not going to tangent on ELO TCG, though I really want to. So, roller derby. How to play. We just played a game in our Sunday game. It was great. We are actually here on the channel. We are going to have an actual roller derby jam on Tuesday, April 19th at 10 p.m. Eastern. It'll be the Shelfies versus the Saviors, so High Shelf Collective versus the crew here at Saves versus Death, and you'll get to see how this actually works. on the track and how a jam functions in play as opposed to just through text. And we're super excited for that. So keep an eye on our socials. But for now, let's talk about there's in order to win, super simple. You have to be the first team to score 10 points. Each squad. They're not called teams. I keep calling them teams, and they're not. They're called squads. Each squad is composed of 5 players, and they take one of 3 positions: your jammer, your blocker, or your rabbit. There are no alternate players or substitutions, so if someone gets incapacitated or ejected from the game, that's it. Your squad either chooses to surrender, or you can continue with fewer players. That's always your option. Now, that being said, Artel did this wonderful thing of, if your table has more than 5 players, here's how to run roller derby. And they introduced a new position called the switch. And you can read up on that one. I'm not going to get into it, but I do love that they added it if there was more players, and I loved their little comment at the bottom where it's like, if you have 9 or more people, well, hey, you know how to handle a large group of players at your table, you got this.
Yeah, like when they said the moment you get beyond 6, I'm like, y'all have more than 5 players at your table? Like, I think the highest number I've ever continuously GM for at like one time was 6 people, and that was a lot. So I'm like, I cannot fathom doing 9 or more players. That's insane.
I've had brief experience with groups that big, and it is nuts.
Yeah, that's insane.
That's like crazy. Like for like a jam where you've got your actual two teams of 5 players, sure, but as an ongoing campaign, there's no way. I would break.
Yeah, I just couldn't keep track of that. Because the thing is, for every edge runner in the crew now, if you're doing a mission that's not like a mini game like this, all the balance and stuff you have to now do for 9 people, not just for like 5 or less, which is like what most of the enemies seem scaled for. So, no. Yeah. I don't want to think about that.
So we will. But if for some reason you have that many people, there are instructions for you.
Yeah, they have detailed instructions for up to 8, and then 9 or more. They're like, you're on your own. Yeah, like I think even the designers probably agree with the take that like, why? Like, we trust you, but why?
So just to kind of like break down the positions really quick, the jammers are your offensive power, and the one who are the only position that can actually score points for your squad by tagging the other squad's rabbit. So rabbits wear sensors on their backs that a jammer has to hit, and that's how you score a point. First squad to 10 points wins. Each squad gets 2 jammers. This to field on the track 2 jammers. And then you have your blockers. Your blockers are your defensive power who protect your rabbits from your jammers. And you get 2 of those on your team. And then each squad gets 1 rabbit who wears that target and tries not to get hit by the jammer. You must always have on the field at least a rabbit and at least 1 jammer. No matter what. Otherwise, you automatically surrender. So I think that's my quick breakdown of the positions. They each have like special limits that they can do. I should also note too, for playing, you can only use melee weapons and they must be blunted. Those are the only weapons allowed on the track. So
I did note that there was no caveat in the rules for pole arms. I'm just saying. Nowhere in the Derby rules that says I can't go running around with like a 10-foot pole.
My thinking is that someone would probably ask a question about that and how fair that would be. But yeah, like within the rules is written, I guess.
I suppose it's one of those things where it's like that defeats the spirit of the game. That falls under
right
against the spirit of the game rule. But as for anything stopping you,
Yeah, I mean, it's like, what's his name in 2077? Wilson, the guy who owns the gun range. He's just like, hey, look, I just want you with your pistols. We don't care about your giant, like, wall bangers. We don't care about your rocket spitters. Like, we just care about some good old-fashioned pistols. And then a dude has like a shotgun on the range. Yeah. It's like, why do you have that? Get the hell off my range.
Yeah.
I'd imagine a similar message about a 10-foot pole in roller derby.
Yeah.
Hey, it's blunt. Exactly. Yeah. Oh, man. So, yeah, as far as kind of the next section here goes, so like any sport, this one has penalties. So the quick note about a flow of play that kind of exists here is at the start of the game, you have your team stack up as a block where the rabbit is in front, the blockers are behind them, and then the jammers are behind the blockers. And they start skating counterclockwise around the arena, which if you look at the one that they include with the DLC, the arrows are pointed the opposite direction that movement should be going. Again, I'm not sure if that maybe was a oversight or something, because there is one other oversight, which I'll get to shortly.
I think it's legit, because I think you're supposed to, because it's like where you line up, because it's like front, middle, back. So it's like start here and line up this direction, even though you're going to skate the other way.
Sure, yeah.
Is my thinking.
And I could see that. Either way, it could make sense. But so for the first 2 rounds, which for those of you who are less aware of how time works in combat, 1 round is 3 seconds. So for the first 6 seconds of the match, no one can touch another player. There is no contact allowed. Contact during this time is a penalty. There are also certain maneuvers and things like that could spur a penalty. So, for example, if a guard or a whip, that's not allowed, basically if they try to do a special move, because there are special technique kind of things that players can do while they're playing the game. If their position can't normally take a specific action, and they take that action, that's a penalty. If they perform an illegal action like making contact with an opposing player between the first and second whistle, which is that first 6 seconds, that's also a penalty. And improper movement, if they move clockwise, because again, you're supposed to be moving counterclockwise around the arena. I guess when mirrored on my camera, it'd be this way. But the idea is that if you move clockwise during a match for more than 4 meters, which is 2 squares, that is a penalty, as is purposefully leaving the track or stopping for more than 3 seconds, which is a round. And so whenever a penalty is flagged, regardless of what it is, the game pauses. Any offending players are placed in a penalty box. Penalized players must remain in that box for 12 seconds after the first whistle blows. Once 12 seconds end, they can skate out of the box and rejoin the jam. If the player is penalized 3 times, if a single player is penalized 3 times during a single jam, which is like a match, they are ejected from the game, but they can return to play in a later jam during the bout. And if a squad collectively accumulates 9 penalties during a single jam, they must surrender and the opposing squad automatically wins. So in other words, it's first to 10 tags, or if you're particularly foul play oriented, once you accrue 9 penalties, it's over for you. So it's really interesting. The rules are something I'm not going to go into like too deeply, but effectively the way that the game kind of works is, like I said, you're skating counterclockwise, and you need to keep moving in that direction. If you stop or move the opposite of that, more than a certain distance given around, then you are going to have penalties. And so with that, only jammers can score points. They're your taggers. The blocker's goal is to prevent jammers from hitting their rabbit. And so the jammers can attack opposing blockers and rabbits, but not other jammers. So the only people you're fair to attack as a jammer is a blocker or the rabbit. You cannot do anything else. And this leads us to be to a point that we have a little bit of slang they give us. It's kind of a sidebar in here. So you've got three things. You've got the intern, which is if you've been skating less than a year. You're considered an intern until you've got a year under your belt. If you purposefully score a penalty to take down an opponent, you're a hit bitch, which is honestly a great word.
Right?
I like it.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, it really does. It hits the lips nicely. And then finally, there's water sliding, which sounds fun until I read the description, which is when you send an opponent scraping along the track so hard, it burns the pattern of their fishnets into their skin. So that's water sliding. So all of that kind of is telling of like how violent this can be. So if a jammer is excessively injured, incapacitated, penalized, ejected from the game, or reassigned to a new position, play pauses as if the referees had flagged the penalty. The squad has the option of reassigning a blocker as a jammer. The reassignment was due to a penalty. When the penalized player returns to the jam, they do so as a blocker. If a squad can't field a jammer, it must surrender. So we already kind of talked about that earlier. And yeah, so it basically talks about subbing people out. When you're playing this, your combat rules are all different. Not entirely different, but they're a little different. So instead of reflex being your initiative stat, move takes its place, meaning your Sandevistan and Koreznikov does nothing here, because both of those, no, they might actually, because I believe they talk about initiative, not reflex. So technically your Speedwear still comes into play here, which leads to some interesting conversations we could have about how fair is it to have cyberware. The run action is off limits. No one can take it. So no double movement. They can travel up to their move as per normal. Special actions can temporarily increase or decrease it. Any player dropped to 0 HP is considered to be too injured to continue and is ejected from the game. And they can suffer up to 2 critical injuries and remain in play. If they suffer a third, they are considered too injured and they are ejected from the game. And then roller derby players have access to special actions, which are described in here. And I don't know if one of you wanted to go over those, or if you wanted to kind of leave that to be read, because these are where we start getting into like the nitty gritty of the game and such.
I would say like there's 4 special moves. I do like bumping is one of them, so you can bump into another player and move them. But only certain positions can bump certain players, so you've got to be careful about those illegal maneuvers because they will get you. I do like guard is nice for a blocker because you have like some extra, like you can hold your action, like it's special hold your action to help protect your rabbit. The skate or die is interesting because if you fail your check, like that's how you either increase your move or decrease your move. So if you fail your check, like you're penalized by like a movement of 2 for the next round. But if you succeed, you get to increase it by 2. And I feel like that's super handy for your jammers and your rabbits. Well, probably for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, anything that increases
need to stay with your rabbit, right?
I mean, in theory, or at the very least, they need to be between the enemy jammer and the rabbit, even if the rabbit's way out ahead for some reason. So that's kind of where, like, yeah, and skater die is always going to be good because increasing your movement speed is honestly good, especially given that you can't take the run action. So that is a big thing. And then I love whip. So the idea of whip is it's just a neat idea. So the idea is you like grab someone else's hand and then just throw them forward basically by literally whipping them around you. And you can only do this if you're a blocker or a jammer. But the idea is that you can basically put someone out into the position in front of you. So if your squad mate jammer is behind you, the squad's blocker, and you've got the room to whip them forward, they get a little bit of a boost headed towards the other team's rabbit, and they could tag them. So it's an interesting little maneuver that you can do there.
So for my whole roller derby knowledge, it comes from the movie Whip It, which they do use the whip. They actually also at one point grab someone's foot and use like their foot to help grab and like whip, which is amazing. It's a fun movie. I highly recommend.
Yeah, it is fun.
But,
very good source of more roller derby.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, because before this came out, I think I once worked with a girl who was a roller derby player, but like I didn't know much about it even after hearing her talk about it, and then I didn't think about it again until this came out, and I'm like, oh, now I need to learn. But so to I guess kind of wrap the DLC, so we get an image of the roller derby track at the very end. Similar to stickball, we get a little bit of new gear. That said, it's nothing that you're probably going to use outside of roller derby matches for the most part. So first you got roller derby padding, which is a uniform padding for roller derby as determined by regulations established in the Night City Wonderland League. Head and body are purchased separately, each costing 50 eddies. It is armored like Kevlar. It's SP7. So again, nothing too impressive, nothing to write home about. If you're edge running, you're probably not edge running in that. And roller derby skates, which is they increase movement by 4 meters / yards when using the run action. So just like normal skates do. Putting the skates on or taking them off requires an action. Any options stored in a cyber leg or meat leg are inaccessible while the skates are worn. At the GM's discretion, performing a physical task involving the legs or balance while wearing skates might count as a complex task and and impose a -2 modifier to certain checks. This modifier shouldn't be applied to checks made during a roller derby jam, because that's exactly what they're designed for. So I did see someone mention earlier, ask about kind of what modifying that would look like. And I guess like you could modify them to maybe grease the axles or something and make them roll smoother, and therefore maybe give you an even greater speed boost or something. But I mean, it's probably going to come down to typical tech upgrades. But they have gear, they have stats. So at that point, you could, in theory, have a tech come by and augment them somehow. But I'd be curious to see if that gets penalized or something for like improper equipment.
Not necessarily for the skates, but the roller derby armor, having that +1 SP, while it looks like regular, would not be a bad idea.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's very, very true. Yeah, the question was about the skates specifically, but yeah. I agree. Yeah, having 1 more SP on your armor is never a bad thing.
I know what else you could do. I would also argue, as like a player GM, I would allow it if your background, if you came or you were part of a currently existing roller derby league as your character, and you wore skates like all the time during combat, I would not impose that penalty to do tricks, because I assume you have had the practice. So long as you were still like actively playing, not like, oh, I was part of a roller derby thing when I was, a kid and I haven't touched roller skates in 10 years, then no. But I assume...
Sure. I think the -2 would be more like, think about when you have uneven terrain, for example, though. Like, if you have, like, a lot of gravel in an area, for example, like, if you've ever seen someone riding, like, a skateboard or even roller skates, like, there are plenty of videos out on the internet of, like, you go over bumps that are too raised. Like, that's one of the big things that buildings will do. Talk about hostile architecture a little bit. They'll put bumps on concrete or on rails that are tailor-made to like throw you off the rail or off your board, or basically to do something to make it impossible, quote unquote, for you to do anything with it. So like that's where I think they start talking about like complex tasks. Like, could you do it? Sure. Is it harder to do it because like it's not really built or it's been engineered to like counter that kind of movement? Yeah, that's also possibly true, even if you're like really experienced with it. That just means that your check is probably still going to pass even if you've got the -2.
In theory. Unless you roll a 1.
But yeah, it really depends on context when we were talking about that, I think, more than anything else. Let's see. So if a human ref, not an AI, using 2983.
The question was $10,000 question. How hard is it to get away with a foul? To which I said it depends on the referee's perception check or the kindness of your GM.
Yeah.
Was my answer.
And I think that's where you could almost have a contested like set of rolls against like a ref's perception or something. And like what the other would be, it'd just depend on the action I guess you're taking, and like also bribery before the match could come into play. Yeah. You know, if you want to play dirty. Bribery is a skill on your character sheet, guys. Like, just remember
I was thinking conceal reveal would be a good one if you wanted to try and make like illegal blows without being seen by the referee, or making slightly legal blows, because I remember in the DLC it mentions that the head and the legs are illegal targets. But I don't see why, if you were like very slick or you got some nice positioning in with a blocker, why you couldn't just sweep somebody's legs up from underneath them with a baton and then move right on when the ref can't see with like a conceal reveal check.
Yeah, it's a ref. They slipped. That's on them. Like,
yeah, they didn't see it.
Like, and yeah, that's very something that's very possible. Or you like, as you take the action, you roll a stealth with it to try and like disguise or do it in such a way that it's less easily interpreted as the foul that you know it is. That's another way that I would maybe roll it, is like roll me a stealth check and this other thing that you're doing, and then use the stealth roll to kind of contest perception like you normally would. That could be fun. There's all kinds of ways you could maybe brew that in.
There's lots of wiggle room within the DLC for some of these things.
Yeah, well, and I think that's like, I think all the better DLCs are that way, where it's like, we're giving you like the surface level rules, but we fully expect you to take this and like do something with it on your own and make something of it independently of like what we've written in the packet itself. So I do like that. I mean, I definitely like how open to interpretation, because that also leads into like what we were talking about earlier, where like gigs can just kind of flow naturally, and you really start getting like thinking about, how would those like less savory elements of a competitive sport work in this context?
Yeah, we need X team to lose. Do you bribe them? Do you bribe the other team? Do you bribe someone to make a foul? Do you bribe the ref to look the other way? Like, bribery.
You bribe the coach.
Them yourself?
You bribe the coach or the ref, and all of a sudden, yeah, you just fix the match that way. I mean, that was always the complaint when I was in college. Is like, someone always, the visiting teams always bribe our refs, because we never get good calls on us, and they get all the better calls for them. Like, why does that happen so consistently and only here? Yep. So, like, it wouldn't shock me if you had something like that happen in the league.
And it could be a really interesting thing, because they don't talk about referees in the DLC. But what if a referee got paid off and some like team is pissed and now they want to get out of the city, and you have to get them? They've paid you to get them out of the city.
Yeah, I mean,
or get them to a safe house to lay low, because
yeah, I mean, like we've said, there's like plenty to chew on when you read beyond this as being just a rule set for a mini game. Like, there's a lot that you can do with this. That 10 pages is not a small amount of material, and there's plenty to like consider with regard to that, and like what it could become in a broader campaign or context kind of written around it.
Also bribe them with yellow TCG cards or online goodies.
Okay, look, ref. I know that this bout is supposed to be one of the biggest of the year, but I'll give you like 1,000 in ELO gold cards if you just, know when to look the other way.
Yeah. I got a Sword of Arvish sitting in my inventory. Here's a screenshot. It's yours if you...
Look, my Elfline's bank is open to you as long as the right things happen here, and I think you know what they are.
If you win this championship, I can give you my rank 10 archer.
Yeah.
That's how much we need to win this game.
I will give you my rank 10 bowmaster. That is important.
Yeah.
Like...
Complete kit, everything.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. No, and thus we leak back into EO.
Hello. My plan along. By the way, did we talk about critical injuries?
Were there special critical injuries?
No,
I
mostly...
mentioned that. I mentioned you could sustain up to 2 and keep playing. The moment you get your 3rd, you're out. Yeah.
Awesome. That was it.
Yeah. There are elements of the DLC that I know we didn't cover, but again, if you're listening to this, watching this, etc., definitely go get it. The document is awesome. I find it's another one of those, like, when Stickball first came out, my reaction to it was very much the same of like, oh, it's a sport, yay! I don't have time for that. But like this by both of them, I had the same kind of like, once I read deeper into it, it's like, okay, there's a lot you could do with this because it's not just rules for a game, it's also like the culture around these things.
I had one of my bandits meet with a Billhook member actually blocking Jay, and I didn't plan it properly ahead of my ahead that I should have, but I was like, oh, he'd have some homebrew thing. I was like, oh man, what do I want to make? That's a really interesting way of introducing like a new drug into the city.
Ooh, yeah, like some performance enhancing drugs or something like that. That'd be interesting. I mean, the way that my current party would probably go about it is they just drug the other team and make them see all kinds of fun hallucinations with blue glass that they've enhanced all kinds of notoriously different ways. Yeah, like that is the trend my team is on. But then again, they're based out of the old combat zone. They're just a little bit unhinged.
They have a different way of doing things.
Whatever works, man.
That is the kindest way to describe the kind of heinous stuff they do.
Oh man. But yeah, I mean, everything that's in here just opens up so many possibilities beyond just life on the track. So.
Yes.
Oh god, a Maelstrom team? That would be terrifying. Terrifying.
I don't want to see what that turns into, because that...
I do, but I don't.
Talk about... Yeah, exactly. It's like that.
Chasing the rabbit too.
Yeah. We need ELO expansion pack 2, and it sounds like we need like, here's 10 more unofficial teams from the Night City Underground of roller derby. Maybe we need some stickball teams in there too. Here's 10 more of each. Do something like that, or maybe, who knows? Maybe we'll get that in Forlorn Hope Plus. Maybe we get a section about that. That could be a fun little thing.
You know what? For Blood Bowl, when I do finally figure out what it is, although I've got a good handle on it, I think Maelstrom is probably the top, like a top gang that plays Blood Bowl.
I could see it. I very well could see it. Yeah, they've got the right kind of vibe for that level of violence.
Yeah.
Heavily armored cheerleaders eyeballing the ref through the game.
You don't need to bribe anybody. You just get Maelstrom to show up and be like, hey, you want to live through this? You'll make these calls. This is my friends over there.
Maybe we should let the cyborgs win.
Let's let the Borderlands Cyber Psycho players do what they're gonna do, and everyone gets to go home today instead of being riddled with lead. Yeah,
it's like Star Wars with because a Wookiee won't pull your like a droid won't pull your arms off if you lose. Let the Maelstrom win.
I love that "We know where you live" don't sound like a proper team chant. But I'm just
where you live. We know where you live.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm just picturing all the unhinged Maelstrom members in the audience watching their team compete, and that being the chant that's like echoing through whatever stadium or field they've got set up for the bout. That'd be so funny. Oh
especially, but it's all robotic too, right? So it would just be like this.
Yeah, like heavily distorted audio vox to hell. Oh yeah, that's the good stuff right there.
That would be, I would say those matches are probably like the highest in audience like attention, even though like the level of fear is like great.
Yeah, that's where you get a couple of like emplaced cameras or something and say, you know, for safety reasons, we've gone remote with this, but we're going to bring you all the action to our garden patch. And those probably are very well attended online as like garden events.
Oh, you know what would be fun to do on a track, and I probably shouldn't say this because I was like, oh, maybe I could do this like during our bout. Those, what came in with Gear Miss, the little like 1-inch speakers? What are they? The
Oh yeah.
Mini Meg. Yes. Mini Meg speakers?
Yes.
Attach them to like your shoulders or onto your armor, so it just whispers or shouts like, we know where you live, as you like move by, or some sort of intimidation tactic.
And then you just eyeball the other player as you're skating past.
Yeah, you don't say anything. It's just this threat through the speaker where they're like, that wasn't them, but holy shit. Or attach a Mini Mag speaker to their helmet so they're just hearing this song or this music or this voice and like aren't aware that that's what you did.
The crazy thing, so one of the players in one of the Wednesday night games that I play in, he's a rocker boy who just got a linear frame made that has speakers implanted all over it under his Urban Flash wear. And so anytime he wants to open up a concert, he could just do it on the street. That would be like one of the wildest things, to have like an implanted linear frame full of speakers that same way that you could adjust to be all kinds of chaotic there. Because again, the regulations don't say anything about sound, ref. Like,
I would like force everyone else to make concentration checks, like even your own team members at that point. It's like, no, you want to focus on the game, concentration check.
Yeah, no, if you're going for like whatever the like Banshee speakers are or whatever, like if you're cranking that, because that's what he has, is just a bunch of those implanted all over his arms and like back and stuff. So it's like, yeah, if you did that, yes, probably there would be some resist drug torture checks happening very frequently.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if all you're doing is intimidation, yeah, then that starts getting into like concentration, or maybe even you do some face downs on the field, and all of a sudden they've got a -2 to anything they do to you because they're just feeling that intimidation.
Yeah.
I'm just really imagining like a blocker or a jammer that's got this what is it? The Borgware array for the extra eyes, so that they can just stare somebody down as they go past them. Just all these little swiveling stalks, so that they've got these eyes just following them no matter where they go.
I know where you live. I know where you
live. Yeah, and then like you just hear the like quiet "I know where you live," and then like a signal light goes off and from the audience, "We know where you live! We know where you live!" And it's just like,
as these eyes stare at you as this person moves past.
Oh god. Yeah, that's nightmare fuel. That is pure nightmare fuel. Oh god. Yeah, I like where this is going.
I love it. I'm terrified of it, but I love it.
be fun. That'd be real fun.
Just crank the insanity up to 11.
Yep. Oh, one thing I did want to mention briefly, because Jess and I noticed this when we were going over this in preparation for the podcast today. There's a section further up in the DLC where they talk about the number of penalties, and they say 10 penalties ejects you from the game, and then further down they say 9. I reached out to Rob Barefoot, the media ambassador for Artel Saurian, and I asked him, like, hey, we noticed this inconsistency. What's the official word on it? Because they're all at Gamma this week. And he says, I'll check with Jay. And like 5 minutes later, he's like, it's 9. So they will be fixing that. And I imagine they'll probably put out an announcement so everyone can re-download the DLC when they do. But just so that everyone is aware, if you see that inconsistency, we saw it, it is 9. 9 is the correct number of penalties before you're ejected from the game. I'm starting to feel like there would be a good money for edge runners who run security for star players, referees, and their families. Yeah, potentially.
Yeah.
Potentially. It certainly leans into, like, for smaller teams in the league or teams that are from rougher parts of the city, like, like what Patient was talking about earlier with, which was the combat zone cannons. Since they're in a pretty rough part of the city, you can only imagine that there's very likely going to be a degree of intimidation tactics if ever that team was to, like, be performing well or whatever. I like many nerds love me some anime. And there's one that came out more years ago than I'd like to admit. Megalobox. That was all about, like, it was like a augmented boxing championship. And this guy went in with no augments. He just went in as, like, a flesh and bone boxer. And he started the series, like, throwing bouts all the time, and then, like, he eventually just hits his wall when we kind of pick up with him in the show, and, like, he just takes off becoming, like, an actual sports star in the scene, beating these fully augmented boxers with just his human reflexes and stuff. So it's like that his story is very in line with, like, coming from a combat zone and, like, what that would look like for a sports team from that part of the city. So, like, it'd be interesting. There's like all kinds of stories you can tell through this lens. I think that it's very interesting.
Even, like, I would say the unicorns with their excess of wealth could be like, yo, we need to play a game or we're gonna get kicked out. No one will come to our track, but we're not going somewhere else, so we're gonna hire you to bring the team like as security to convince Lazarus not to shoot them and bring them through.
No, absolutely. And yeah, Bjorn, sports drama has a lot to draw from for story seeds. Yeah, it absolutely does. And it's like, and they layer a little of the drama in each of the teams in terms of, like, here's some hooks you can play with almost without calling them that. So yeah, it'd be interesting.
Before I wrap up and say farewell, is there anything else we wanted to talk about or mention? Cobra Kai, sports drama, family drama, teen cringe, soap opera, all in one.
Good old Cobra Kai.
I was gonna say, because it does mention that it's not been picked up by any, like, major news networks or anything. You could have a small news network, like, start picking it up or following a derby team to try to make it big, and that could even be a gig all on its own of, like, hey, we're trying to get this on the thing. We need people to, like, film it properly, whatever.
Yeah, no, that could be an interesting gig into itself, because I kind of had that thought earlier too when we were initially talking about that part of it. It's like, oh yeah, getting noticed is almost like a gig unto itself. So it is interesting. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think I said my piece on the DLC itself, lest we risk getting dovetailed into ELO discussion for the rest of the night.
We'll do a separate stream on that.
We can do that.
Yes. Okay. Well then, guys, that concludes this episode of Night City Sofa. So thank you all so much for joining us today. If you were here live in chat, or for watching this on YouTube, we greatly appreciate you. Let us know what you thought, and if there's any future things you'd like to see discussed, any questions you have about ELO, because Emran and I will talk about that apparently till the cows come home. So send us all your ELO stuff. We are here for that. If you have any questions or any comments, please leave them in our YouTube video or on our social media platforms, or of course in our Discords, or one of our Discords. I will put Emeron's up in a moment. Night City Sofa will return the first Thursday of next month to talk about the next DLC release, as we do. And be sure to return Saturday for the next episode of Shades of Scarlet. I think Blank is feeling better, and we should be back to a regularly scheduled campaign. Keep an eye on our socials and Discord just in case that doesn't happen. And then Sunday, Indie Bandits returns with the crew back together, and we'll see how that goes for them. Both, of course, are Cyberpunk Red ongoing campaigns that air live right here on Twitch at 10 p.m. Eastern. In addition to our games, check out Neon Inferno, which I will let everyone talk about. That way.
Yeah, no, so those of you who are unfamiliar with my content, I started Neon Inferno a little over a year ago. We're on our second season now, Afterglow. It involved, the first season was just a scrappy kind of adventure of the week until about halfway through, and without spoiling anything, I will say it involves edge runners running up against the police, other assassin gangs, and ultimately corporations to vie for their own little piece of the city. And Afterglow is the consequences of the first crew and like what they did and how it's affecting the little people and other edge runners within the city. So the cast is largely the same. The characters they play are different. And we usually run on Monday nights, starting at 7:30 p.m. Arizona time, because we're one of the weird ones that doesn't change for daylight. So starting next week, that will be aligned with Pacific. So if you are 7:30 Pacific, you're on the same time zone as me. If you're Eastern, it'll be 10:30 Eastern, and then the rest of you can kind of figure your time zone out from there. I usually time code it as an announcement in my Discord before we go live as well. Similar, it sounds like, to what you guys have had go on the last couple weeks. We've had some scheduling conflicts last 2 weeks, so with any luck, this Monday is it, and we should be back on track on our weekly basis. But yeah, I have had a lot of fun doing it, and I love to see new people in there. So definitely come check us out. I think you'll have fun.
And thank you, Patient, for being here as always and giving us your thoughts and your input and running at our table with your ideas. Appreciate you.
Always happy to be here. Always happy to give my 2 cents on cool stuff like this.
Been a lot of fun.
It's nice to be on the sofa again.
Yeah, it's a good time.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jess, for inviting me on too. I really appreciate it.
So happy to have you. We'll have another chat, like seriously, just all ELO chat. Because I haven't gotten to do that yet, and I need someone to nerd out with that. So, with that being said,
we can do it.
Yes. Until next time, Tombs, stay frosty.